The title couldn't be better for my argument. The text is a wonderfully jumbly plethora of objects, otherwise known as a Latour litany. Cartons are houses for crackers. Castles are houses for kings. The more that I think about houses, the more things are houses for things. In this story, a dizzying array of objects is presented. They can act as homes for other objects, and of course, in turn, these homes can find themselves on the inside of other homes. Home, then, is purely sensual. It has to do with how an object finds itself inevitably on the inside of some other object. A house is the way one object experiences the object on whose interior it finds itself. So then these sorts of things are also houses. A mirror is a house for reflections. A throat is a house for a hum. A book is a house for a story. A rose is a house for a smell. My head is a house for a secret I never will tell. A flower's at home in a garden. A donkey's at home in a stall. Each creature that's known has a house of its own, and the earth is a house for us all. The time of hyperobjects is the time in which we discover ourselves on the inside of some big objects, bigger than us, that is. Earth, global warming, evolution, and so on. That's what the eco in ecology originally means. Oikos, house. The last two lines of "a house is a house for me" makes this very clear. Now, the ruse of this story seems to be that to display its effortless brio, a lot of silly, fun houses are presented in the penultimate section as we hurry towards the conclusion, which then sets the record straight by talking about a real house, the Earth. But I shall argue that this is not the case. Object-oriented ontology doesn't claim that any object is more real than any other, but it does discount some objects, which it calls sensual objects, or at least my version and Graham Harman's do. Bryant's and Bogost's version may differ on this. What is a sensual object? A sensual object is an appearance for another object. The table for my pencil is a sensual object. The table for my eyes is a sensual object. The table for my dinner is a sensual object. Sensual objects are wonderfully, disturbingly entangled in one another. This is where causality happens for object-oriented ontology, not in some mechanical basement. This is where the magical illusion of appearance happens. A mirror's a house for reflections. Yes, the mesh, the interrelatedness of everything, is a sensual object. Strange strangers are the real objects. Some very important entities that environmentalism thinks of as real, such as nature, are also sensual objects in my book. That is, they appear as what they are for a certain experiencer or user or apprehender or whatever. They are manifestations of what Graham Harman calls the as structure. Here's the kicker. They are as structured even though they appear to be some kind of deep background to human events. This confusion of sensual and real, in the terms of a house as a house for me, is like thinking that bread really is a house for jam, and jam alone, rather than simply an idea that occurs to me and perhaps to the jam when it finds itself slathered in there. Marmalade wants in on the bread? Too bad! Marmalade is an artificial, unnatural parasite. Peanut butter? Illegal alien. Only jam is natural, i.e., bread is only made for jam. See the problem with nature? In object-oriented ontology E's, reification is precisely the reduction of a real object to its sensual appearance for another object. If you want to be poetic about it, or maybe more than poetic, reification is the reduction of one entity to another's fantasy about it. Nature is a reification in this sense. That's why we need ecology without nature. Emergence is also a sensual object, and thus it's in danger of reifying, strangely enough, given its reputation as an unreified, flowy sort of a thing. This is despite its popularity as a replacement for terms such as nature. Emergence, I shall argue, is always emergence for. In this slight hostility to emergence, I differ from Manuel de Landa, from whom emergence is a criterion for realness, and perhaps therefore from Graham Harman, not sure, and I'm sure I haven't thought it all through, but this would be why I must in the end also reject the kind of holism that argues for emergent properties. Emergence, sway, the way the flower unfurls, seeming, upsurge of being, definitely not yet nature or structure. These are some of the terms Heidegger uses to characterize what he considers to be the primary notion of the ancient Greek philosophers. Physis. There is some kind of appearing to, some kind of emerging for going on here. Being isn't separated from seeming at the most fundamental stage of Heidegger's account, and so there is no reason why a poem can't be construed as a physical object in as rich a sense as you like. And this is where scholar Eileen Joy has been working quite recently. It's only counterintuitive if you think that entities come with two floors, some kind of basement mechanics and some kind of pretty living room on top. but for object-oriented ontology, Heidegger's terms for being are simply elaborations on the as structure. Whether you call it emergence or appearance, what we are talking about is a sensual object. Looking backwards, it appears as if postmodern art was weirdly predictive of the age of ecological emergency we have now decisively entered. My favourite example would be David Byrne and Brian Eno's song, The Overload, on Talking Heads' Remain in Light. In the song, a phrase, "a terrible signal too weak to even recognise," could mean at least two things at once, giving rise to a disturbing image of horrifying weakness. The signal could either be a sign of some kind coming through some medium or other, or it could be the medium itself, experienced as a substance in its own right. This superimposition of background and foreground, giving rise to a disturbing of expected relationships between sound and noise and between sign and medium, is a common trait of environmental art that explores ecological awareness in form as well as in content. The creeping realization that global warming is real, running parallel to this kind of environmental art, is also the uncanny sensation of waking up inside an object. Climate is a massively distributed object that surrounds Earth and that includes the sun and greenhouse gases in the upper atmosphere. Too weak to even recognize from a human point of view, it requires terabytes of RAM processing speed to model in real time. Global warming has real, devastating effects on all parts of Earth's surface. Humans no longer live in a world or in an environment, and certainly not in nature. Global warming spells the end of the world, not in an apocalypse, but in an abject living on, in the absence of a meaningful life world bounded by a distant horizon. We have realized that the world is actually a gigantic object in which we exist, like Russian dolls inside a larger Russian doll. With its uncanny shadows and densities, postmodern culture is far more predictive of our contemporary awareness that we exist inside an object than traditional environmentalist culture with its images of interconnected webs and holistic oneness. Research published recently in Psychological Science has correlated moral disgust with physical disgust. If you eat something disgusting, you can feel moral disgust, with the reaction rising in those with more conservative views. Since ecological politics has to do with coexisting with other life forms, even if they are threatening or disgusting, and since Kantian taste is about knowing how to appear disgusted at the right moment, Derrida's brilliant essay Economimesis explores that, and since the whole Kantian edifice, hence the problem of correlationism in which philosophy has been stuck for the last 200 years, namely the notion that meaningfulness is only correlated to the human meaning, that objects are only real insofar as they are accessed by humans and so on. This whole edifice operates through the aesthetic. Therefore, it seems highly important to me that we investigate this phenomenon. In the time of hyperobjects, humans have gone beyond good taste, even romantic sublime good taste, into an uncanny existence with other entities, the strange strangers. Art can only be an uneasy collaboration between humans and non-humans, not a purely human exploration of access to non-humans or the lack thereof. Yet art also becomes expressive of profound causal relationships between beings, since it has been discovered that the aesthetic is the very blood of causality. Philosophy again must draw its inspiration from art, after the moment at which, in a state of the purest refined cynicism, it seemed like a sick joke even to think that thought. Thank you very much.